What are some good tips for choosing your custodial exchange location? Hi, I'm Alicia Kinchlow, the owner of Kinchlow Law, a family law practice based in the Philadelphia area. Now, today we're going to talk about some of the pros and cons of where and when you decide to exchange your child. Now, as always, you're going to want to speak with an attorney about the facts specific to your case, and this video is for informational purposes only. One of the things that I see for people, especially when they come to me after they already have a custody order in place, is that there's some issue with the exchange location. Now, we have to think about custody orders being final orders. Sometimes when people are going through them, especially if they're pro se, which means they represent themselves, they're thinking about what they need right then or what's going on with the child right then. They're not thinking long term. And ultimately, for me, at least for my clients, I would like to reduce the amount of times that you have to come into court. I feel like if we're still kind of going through a case several years in, I may not be doing the best job for you. And so, what I try to do is help you foresee the changes that will ultimately come as your child gets older and potentially as things may change in your life. And that way, if those things happen, you can kind of write them into the order right then and not worry about having to come back into court or try to come up with a new agreement. Now, some of the things you need to think about are going to be safety and timing. Now, safety is of the utmost importance because we want to make sure that all parties are safe. So, if there is a restraining order or a protection from abuse order, also called a PFA, we want to make sure that you're adhering to whatever the rules are or the guidelines are in those particular orders or what may be in your custody order to kind of prevent harm or risk or danger to one of the other parties. And you also, if you are the person who has the PFA against them, you want to do what you can to make sure that you're not in trouble of violating the order. So, usually in those situations, we see the exchanges occurring at the police station. Now, sometimes the order might be silent as to whether or not the exchange is supposed to be inside the police station or outside. Now, typically, I like for it to be inside because that way you can assure that there's nothing that's happened. I have had cases before where things have happened right outside the police precinct, unfortunately, because the exchanges were occurring outside of the police precinct. So if you can, if there's a PFA, that's a great reason for the exchange to occur inside the police precinct in the view of police officers. The other thing that having it at a police precinct can do is that there's someone to verify whether or not someone is late. So, for example, if your exchange is supposed to occur at 6 p.m. inside the police precinct and now it's been 30 minutes, the police, especially in Philadelphia County, will have a list that you can actually, or a form that can be completed by the officer that can say that, okay, dad was here on time, it was 30 minutes and mom still didn't show, and the officer will sign their name and their badge number along with the date and time. So that way, if you need to file a contempt petition against the other party, if you need to modify your custody order because of this situation, then you'll have a record of what's been happening and it's signed by someone other than the parties. So that is another reason to do it. But again, it allows for the parties to generally just be safe. The other thing that we're going to talk about today is going to be timing. So aside from safety, we're going to be talking about timing. And we want people to think about being realistic about the timing. Now, sometimes when orders are made, we're thinking about what's going on at that particular time of the year, or even what's going on generally in terms of getting back and forth. So, for example, our practice is based in the Philadelphia area. Now, getting out of Center City, Philadelphia, to another part of the city really depends on what time of day you do it. You know, there are some times where I'll wait to leave a half hour because that's going to make a huge difference in whether it takes me 15 minutes to get to the next place or if it's going to take me 45 minutes. And some of that is just getting out of Center City parking. So you want to think about, you know, the time that you get off of work. Is it rush hour? Is it going to be low peak hours? So think about those things because if it's going to affect your ability to get to the exchange on time, that may affect whether or not you end up falling in contempt, or if there is a reason to modify your petition in a way that you really don't want it modified. So think about the time of day and what traffic is like during that time of day. Um, the other things we're going to talk about is just, you know, what happens when things change throughout your custody order or throughout the life of your child. Now, remember, again, these orders are supposed to be final orders, and we don't want situations where you have to come into court because, 3 months down the line, you didn't think that about this particular change or that particular change. So, a couple of things to think about are if your exchanges are occurring at school. So, if the pickup and drop offs are mom drops off the child before school, dad picks up the child after school. Things you want to think about. Well, what happens when there is no school? Where is the exchange supposed to occur? If there is no school, who's supposed to keep the child for the day? Should the child stay with mom until the after school time? I've seen that cause a lot of issues with parents, especially where both work and neither want to be responsible for figuring out last minute childcare situations. So you want to make sure you're thinking about that and have something in there that explains what happens when there is no school, especially unexpectedly there is no school. All right, the next thing you want to think about is curbside. What happens when you do the exchanges curbside? How will you notify the other parent that you're there? If you're not supposed to walk up to the door, depending on the age of the child, you might need to not need to do that at all. But you want to think about that. And then kind of going back to the first thing we mentioned, what is the safety issue? Is there a set amount of time that you're going to wait before you leave? And then if the person doesn't get there, what is the method for them getting the child for their custodial time if you've left because they're late and they haven't communicated with you? So those are a couple of things to think about when it comes to school and when it comes to curbside pickups and drop-offs. Now, we talked a little bit about exchanging at the police precinct. One of the cons of exchanging at the police precinct is that the children may end up seeing things that they probably don't need to see. Not all police precincts are pleasant places, and sometimes where you may have to wait to come to actually do the exchanges, you're seeing all types of people come in and out of the police precinct, and that can be distressing, and in certain situations can be almost traumatizing for young children. So you want to think about whether or not you really need to have the exchanges occur at the police precinct, and whether another public place is a good place for you to do it if you don't feel comfortable doing it at mother's house or at father's house. So another option might be, I have some people that do it at a restaurant, at a Target, at a particular place inside the Target. So maybe at the Starbucks inside the Target, or just some other place where there are other people around, that is generally going to be open no matter what during the time that you're going to do the custodial exchanges. And that allows for you guys to be able to prepare, make sure everyone's safe, and that the child doesn't have a traumatizing experience. Now, the other thing you want to think about, aside from what happens if there's no school or something like that, is what happens in the summertime. So sometimes, again, we leave off that thing. We're thinking about school, but we're not thinking about during the summer. So what happens for the exchanges in the summer? Where are you going to exchange if there's no camp at the same school? Is it going to be at camp? If there's no camp and the child is staying with the parents during the day, where your exchange is going to occur? And again, generally, when there's parents who get along well, and who are able to co-parent, and they just need a foundational agreement or order to kind of get them through and make it clear who has what time, these things won't generally pose issues. However, there are high conflict situations where they are going to cause issues, where you're going to have one parent who refuses to bring the child and just won't take the child to you, and now you have to go get them, and vice versa. So you really want to make sure that you're thinking about these things, and it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it, because it can take you a while to actually affect some of the changes that these orders, that putting these clauses in your orders can actually help out with in the beginning. So I hope that sheds some light on a few tips, a few things you should think about, pros and cons of choosing certain locations, as well as making sure you're thinking about the timing, you're thinking about the season, you're thinking about your child growing up, and you're thinking about your safety, because safety also is very, very, very important when you're deciding how and when, where to do your custodial exchanges. All right, now, as always, I'm going to ask you to leave us a comment. Let me know if you have any other ideas for custodial exchange locations, or any other topics you would like us to cover in our videos. Remember, we're doing one every day of 2021 on custody, divorce, and support. So if there are topics you would like me to cover, please drop them in the comments below. And then also make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell, because that way you'll get a notification every time we drop a new video. All right, until next time, take care.